Today we're going to compare the Samsung Galaxy S20 versus the Pixel 4 XL. They both have the telephoto lens, so I'm curious to see how they both stack up, but the Pixel does not have the ultra-wide angle lens, which is really popular and a lot of people do like. So this is a quick low light test of the front-facing camera, and the lighting is pretty usual from the city, just lights from the street lamps and buildings. So let's move on to the next section. Starting off with portrait mode, they're both kind of different. I would say the Pixel is easier to use because you just point, shoot, and it does all the work right after. The way Samsung does it, you have to move around until the screen says ready, but in this case, so far in my experience, it's really quick. But in some of the Samsung pictures you'll see it doesn't register, which I found out while I'm editing because on the screen when I pressed the shutter button, it was ready. Alright, so here's the difference that I've noticed on each one. On the Pixel, the background blur is much more blurrier, it's creamier and denser. Also, the background is more compressed, so the picture looks like it's actually from a DSLR camera. On the Samsung, I would say it has best of both worlds. You can use the wide camera to capture a lot of more things in your picture, and also you can zoom in to get a more compressed background. But if you really want that true portrait picture, then the Pixel just gives off that vibe right from the start. For the front-facing camera, I think the clear winner for me is the Samsung, just because I do like the colors more and my skin tone looks more fleshed out. In portrait mode, the Pixel is more zoomed in, so if you want to take something in your hands to show off your drink or whatever, you would have to do a bit more reaching out, but it's not too uncomfortable. The wide lens on a Samsung is really useful, especially if you're in tighter spaces. Okay, so I just hit record on both, and the phone just failed on me. This is like the third or fifth time that happened this today, so yeah, that's gonna be an issue. So the 3 camera comparisons I've done so far, it happened to me twice. The first time was when I versed it with the iPhone 11. I did restart it after and it worked fine, but if this keeps happening all the time, then this is going to be a big problem. Alright, so moving on into the everyday scenario. The Samsung S20 is going to be the winner here because it does have the ultra-wide angle lens and it can zoom all the way up to 30x. But I think the 30x is more useful for seeing things afar than trying to get a good picture. On the Pixel, the max you can go up is 8x, and I think that's still a good amount of zoom range for the everyday life. And to my surprise, it's still pretty sharp on 8x on the Pixel, and sometimes I think it even looks better than the Samsung S20. It just amazes me how well the software side of things can do so good on the Pixel. And if the Pixel ever get an ultra-wide angle lens, I think it's gonna be a wrap. For HDR and having the better control of the highlights and not overexposing too much, the Pixel still has it down. And if you're more knowledgeable about pictures, the Pixel does give you dual exposure modes, so that gives you the option of having better control of exposing your picture or just adjust it the way how you like it. Yes, the Samsung does have an exposure bar, but that brings down both the shadows and the highlights at the same time. I do favor the colors on a Samsung much more, just because as I'm shooting during golden hour, I do get that nice warm look to it. So it seems like the white balance on a Pixel is more strict. That may be a good thing when you're indoors and having that ugly tungsten light on your subject, but when you're outdoors, especially during golden hour and you want that nice golden look, the Pixel just takes it all away. For low light, the white balance is also strong here. It depends on how you like your pictures. Realistically, the colors on a Samsung is still more vibrant and it's a bit closer to the eyes. If you're more serious about photography, you would probably set your white balance to cancel out that ugly tungsten look, so at this point it's really personal preference. And surprisingly, at max zoom on the Pixel, it's still pretty sharp. The only downsides I can see is that on the Pixel, the darks are really noisy, whereas on the Samsung, it's clean. If you look up in the sky, you can see a lot more noise on the Pixel than the Samsung, so I would highly suggest trying to get closer to your subject or trying to get rid of all the darker spots. Now moving on into night mode or really dark situations, the Samsung doesn't perform as fast. As I press the shutter button, I can feel a bit of that lag and it does buffer a bit. When you switch to night mode, you gotta wait like a quick second for it to be ready. And I don't know if this is a glitch or not, but sometimes on a Samsung I can see 28 seconds. Maybe it thinks it's on a tripod, but it does take a little bit more just to go back into the 4 to 10 second zone. And yes, it did happen to me. I did have to hold it for 28 seconds. Maybe I just hit it at that time when it thinks I'm on a tripod. On the Pixel, I do like how it knows that it's too dark and it just suggests you to go to night sight, which you can tap and it brings you right to that mode. Now for the colors, it's a bit more washed out on the Pixel, whereas on the Samsung you can still see a bit more of that saturation. Now moving on to video, the Pixel can shoot up to 4K, regular 4K, whereas on the Samsung it has a lot more modes than that. For stabilization, I would give it to the Pixel just because each hard step I take, it smooths that out, whereas on a Samsung, you can see the tiny micro jitters. And for color accuracy, it's much more closer to the eye on a Pixel as well. On a Samsung, the colors are really vibrant, the sky realistically is not that blue, and it kind of makes the floor blue as well. And since both of these cameras do have the telephoto lens, I decided to compare them. Clearly, the Pixel is the winner. And this is a quick comparison with the ultra-wide angle lens, which I do prefer and do like on phones. It's really helpful when you're in tight spaces and you can capture everything. Samsung can shoot in 4K 60, but the stabilization isn't as good. For some reason, it just gotten worse. And your only option to record is with the main camera lens, so you can't really use the other lenses provided. The S20 also has 8K mode, which zooms in a lot, which matches closely to the focal length of the Pixel 4. The 8K is stabilized, is not the best, and when I'm panning quickly, I can see a lot more jitters and stuttering. Now moving on to low light situations, for stabilization they seem really similar, and for micro jitters they also are identical as well. As I'm walking through this path, I noticed the white balance on the Pixel is really aggressive, so you can see it change from tungsten to regular daylight. Now zooming in into the telephoto lenses, naturally is 3x on the Samsung and 2x on the Pixel. And seeing these side by side, the Pixel is cleaner and more stable. For 4K 60 on a Samsung, there's a bit more micro jitters, but the sky is cleaner in terms of noise. And for 8K, I would highly avoid it in low light. It's just too blurry and there's a lot of noise. So that's my comparison with these two phones. They both have their own strengths and weaknesses. For the value, I feel like the Samsung does offer a bit more for the money you're spending. Let me know your thoughts down below. I do have the links in the description if you are interested in any of these phones. Please follow me on Instagram, give a like, subscribe if you want to see more S20 content, hit the bell, and thanks for watching.